This is probably going to be the most in-depth video on how to run an effective sales rep meeting, on how to actually meet with your sales reps on weekly one-to-ones, how to manage them, how to get the best out of them and drive performance. I'm even going to go over what to do when they're not performing and all the things that need to be done. So in this video, I'm going to break down how to run an effective sales one-on-one meeting with your sales reps, how to manage them, how to drive the best performance out of them, and I'm going to give you a simple framework on what to follow in 5 easy steps. If you don't know who I am, my name is Usman Kiani, and I've worked in sales for my entire career. I worked at 2 8-figure companies, and now whilst building my own 8-figure business, I share everything that I learned along the way. And now let's go into point 1. So the first thing is preparation. So prep for short. So what type of prep do you need to be doing before your sales meetings? Well, you need to make sure that you've looked at all of the data for the salesperson before the meeting. Most managers, when we look at the sales reviews that they're having, they're not bringing all the data from that sales rep to review their performance. They're just going off how they feel. And when a meeting is done based on emotion, it's a lot harder to manage. When it's based upon your business's values and the mission and based upon the metrics that they should be hitting, it's far easier because it's more of a numbers conversation which becomes more logical. Making the conversation logical is probably the easiest part. So the preparation that you need to go through is in a few different stages. You need to make sure that you've gone on the dashboard and then you've checked all the KPIs. So you've downloaded all the information and you've got all their metrics. And then also, you're going to make sure that you've got their targets. You're going to make sure that you've got all of their targets that they should be hitting and looking at where they're tracking right now. So then you know, are they on track and how off track they are? Because before the conversation, they will probably know, well, they should know if they're doing good and if they're doing bad. And you also being prepped with the knowledge of exactly what's been going on. Now, if you're a good manager, you will not only just look at the dashboards, but you will go into the detail. You will look at the lead sources. You will look at where each lead has come from. You will look at how it was stored. You will look at the notes. You will read through a couple of notes. You might dip into listen to an old sales call from that and just pulse check everything. But being super prepared for that meeting is a massive component because that sales rep is going to feel extremely valued when you've actually looked into their performance, and then you can actually praise them on the things that they've done good. Without you actually looking into it, how will you be able to actually analyze their performance? And we see so many meetings that sales managers and founders are doing with their sales teams, and they have no data to go off. So I'll do a deep dive into their data. I'll probably spend, if the meeting is half an hour, I'll spend 15 minutes before the meeting looking through all the metrics and all the information about that meeting on what they need and where they've been tracking so far. So I'll go into a lot of detail on that area. And then point number 2 is about setting the stage. And if you notice, setting the stage. Now, if you notice, 2 of these points are for you to do. And you'll be surprised how most one-to-ones turn into bashing and conversations of your sales rep and just talking about all the bad performance. But look how a good meeting is structured. The first 2 points are all around how you should be understanding where they're already at, not just on an emotional level, but on the data. Now, setting the stage is all about when you speak to them, what you're going to be going over is, hey, I'm going to be covering over these things. Just as you would frame a sales call, you might frame that sales meeting, but it's easy to build rapport. Now, this is what happens to a lot of us. We'll have a sales meeting with our reps or our frontline staff. And in that meeting, we're so amped up, we've got so much stress, and we've got so many things that are happening to us in our life, we'll go straight into the meeting and go straight directly into the point. Now, if you jump straight into the point and you're super aggressive and super direct, what happens? They instantly get defensive. Their hands go up. Oh, why are you coming at me? Why are you coming at me so strong? Like, they feel attacked. When someone feels attacked, they get defensive. And then you're wondering, why are they defensive? They don't want to learn. But it's initially because of the approach that you started with. And one of the best things that I'd say how to start is by just building rapport, the same as you would on a sales call. It's funny how similar a lot of the sales calls are to actually a good one-to-one meeting. Obviously, there's no sale at the end, or is there? Is it because you're actually selling an idea to them? Who would argue, Daniel Pink would argue, you are selling something to them. But Setting the stage is such an important part, and how I actually do this, it would be by saying to them very early on, so how are you doing? How's your week been? How are you finding everything? And I will take my time to really understand that. I won't rush through that. It's not like, hey man, how are you? And then jump straight in and give them feedback. I would set the stage and say, going to go over everything that you're struggling with. There seems to be a lot going on at the moment. So whatever you need, I want to just be here for you. And comfort them, be ready to open the door for them to actually confide in you for something they're struggling with. Part of the setting the stage is all about how you will give them an opportunity very early on to say what they're struggling with. If you go in first and criticize them before they've had a chance to explain, they're not going to feel heard, they're not going to feel listened to, they're not going to feel led, they're not going to feel like you're really in it for them. So this is the first thing that needs to be done straight after the preparation. So prep and then set the stage. Now the meeting's about to start. So what's the first thing that you cover with them in that meeting? I make it all about the data. So what I do is I do a method called review and reflect. So I review and I reflect. Reflect. That says reflect. So review and reflect is where I will say to them, so let's just go over the stats this week on how you're doing. I do this every single week as a standard. Of course, I want to talk about all the issues and all these things that have been happening, but I hold back, I show restraint. Just like on a sales call, you might just want to share the price and close them. You do a lot of fact finding, you find out a lot about them, and that's why the structure of these meetings works so well. The review and reflect, how I would do this stage in detail would be, I would go sit with them and say, how's your week going? Just go over the data with me and we go over it together. So I'll probably print out the data or I'll have it on the computer. It is nice to have it printed out because then you can kind of annotate it and then it's more visual. You're going to be reviewing a lot of the stuff that you found in your prep. You actually review everything that is based upon their KPIs. So if it's something that they're KPI'd on, I would actually review on it. So I would have, they would know that it's coming because it becomes just like second nature. You're always reviewing that information all the time. They know what to expect. And the reason why this structure works so well is when they know what to expect, they now know what you're going to be asking them, which allows them to prepare for that, which allows them to improve their performance every week. You may think this is one meeting, but it's the repetition, it's the way the meeting's structured over a long-term basis. I've managed one rep for over 3.5 years. That was my longest standing salesperson within my team. And when I managed one person for 3.5 years and the meeting was done the same way all the time, constantly tweaking the process allowed me to get the best performance out of him. Because when we compared his performance from year 1 to year 3, it was completely different, but it was the same things being measured. But his targets would grow, he would develop, and we were just pushing him more and more, but the structure of the meeting would stay about the same. But every single week, it was super valuable. I often got feedback saying how valuable they found that meeting during that process. So they'll say, oh, these one-to-ones are like so good for me because I can just come and I can realign myself and I can know exactly where I'm going. So you want to review and reflect all the numbers. And how I would do that with them is I would say, so how are you finding it? Go over these numbers with me. I get them to go over their numbers with me rather than me go over it with them. So they explain their numbers to me. And let me give you a difference in example. One would say, so just go over these numbers with me, and then they'll simply reply saying, yeah, so what's happened this week is this and then that. And they'll either talk about themselves in praise or they'll talk about themselves like they're doing bad. The reason why you want them to talk first is because when they talk and they're either being positive or negative, it allows you to quickly understand, do they actually know where they're at? Because if they're absolutely smashing all their budgets and targets and going above and beyond, they will simply say, yeah, things are only going well. I'm just trying to chase the top spot at the moment. I'm just trying to see how much I can overachieve. Or if they're not hitting the top spot and if they're underachieving, they're missing their KPIs, they might even say, it's been a real tough week. I've been struggling a lot. This allows you to let them bring it to the table rather than you going in. It's a real consultative approach, and it's one of the most effective mechanisms of running a sales team where you ask them to come to you, and it's done through that method. So reflect and review all that process with them, and they will go over all of their stats. Part number 4 in the meeting, They've gone over everything of their performance. They've told you how they're doing. You're just simply complying and saying, yes, that's how it's going. And now it's your part. Your part is to develop and train them. This is the first time that you intervene, and you probably will do a lot of the talking. So develop and train is the next phase. And with develop and train, what you're doing here is we've prepped them. You've had your prep. You prepped for that meeting. You set the stage. They know what to expect. They told you everything they was to able to review and reflect all the stats that you brought to the meeting. Now you're developing and training them. And how are you doing that? You're doing that by recognizing where they're falling short in their short-term and long-term goals, which you would write down. And you see how you can support them. You ask them, what areas are you developing in? And you have that continuous development with them. You might be saying, come off the dialer, come off the phones, come off your lead generation for half an hour a week or 1 hour a week and work on this area. And this is your development point. In this meeting, this could take between 30 and 45 minutes. At times, if someone's struggling, they might need you for an hour. But running a sales team is not easy. This is why sales managers need the time. This meeting, if it's a good hour meeting, that developing and train could be taking 10 to 15 minutes of that. And in that meeting, you're going to be going into a lot of detail about what they need to improve. With the development part, you'll be going over enough detail that they feel as though they're learning from you. If they don't feel inspired by you, if they're not learning from you, if you're not teaching them all the things that they want to learn, which you ask them, then they're not going to see you in that way. Part of this role is you actually being a real leader. And for them to want to come to you and learn from you will be a big driving point, because it is a mentorship for them. And when I think back to when I was a salesperson, all the best mentors that I had, they were my best managers. And they're the ones that got the best out of me. Training them could be as simple as going through drills, going through some repetitions with them and going through a bit of like back and forth on how they've been trying things, what they have said. I could do a little mini role play with them. But that little bit of training would just be in there just to give them some tips. Every single meeting, I make sure that I give them 1 or 2 pointers on something alongside the praise. The praise comes and then they give them 1 or 2 pointers. You've probably heard the term about the shit sandwich, which is give them good feedback, give them shit feedback, give them good feedback. I will always ensure that there's good feedback on either side of me sharing something constructive. There is time to give shit feedback. If there's a time where I've got 3-4 bits of feedback that are really negative, I might hold 1 or 2 of them back because I want to make the most effective ones. You can only learn so many things. Like when you go to the gym and let's say you're doing a set of squats and your knee buckles in and your back rounds over and the coach tells you to change 2 things the next rep, it's so much harder to change 2 things. When the coach says, just keep your knee out on this one, then you do it right. In the next set, just keep your back straighter on this set. By doing one thing, you're able to implement changes so much quicker. And that's what makes a good coach. He knows when to recognize the learning behaviors and when to give 1 point to change each time. And this is why I make sure their training is so specific. At times I will focus on 1 point solely, but I might just dig into another point. But never I'm going to give 3-4 bits of training during one meeting. And the last thing is strategy and planning. So strategy and planning, I actually word it as, what do you need from me? That's how I start it. Do you need from me? So I will always ask, what do you need from me? Because I want to make sure that they feel supported, that they have any bit of advice and any bit of knowledge that they need to be able to go ahead. Because the worst thing is in that week, if they was to turn around and say, oh, you never showed me that. Simply by saying, what do you need from me? You can document it and you can give them the support they need. But strategy and planning is how to leave the meeting and by finishing up and saying, great, how are you finishing this meeting? What are you going to be working on this week? What support do you need from me? And you get them to plan and commit to numbers. So that in the strategy and planning part, so in this framework of the 5 steps, prep, setting, review, development and train, and strategy and planning, in strategy and planning, I will go over what they need to hit their KPIs. So if they're lagging behind, I'll say, what support do you need from me? Nice. And how are you planning on hitting these numbers? And they tell you. And then how you drive accountability is you'll say, when are you going to get it done by? And are you sure? What happens if you don't get it? And what would be a potential thing that could happen if you wasn't to get this? And what would you do if that doesn't work? By asking them questions, that's how you prompt them. That's why it's so similar to a sales call, because it's all built on questions rather than built on you telling them. And this is how I was able to maintain such high performing sales teams, because I would simply just ask questions rather than go out and tell them all the time. These 5 points will help you build an incredible sales team and will help you run effective one-to-ones. If you like this video, like and share, comment down below to tell us what more you want to see from us. Thank you. Bye.